In today's video, we are creating fun, easy to do, patriotic projects on a budget. I hope you enjoy. For this project, I'm using this piece of wood from Dollar Tree. It measures 5.5 inches by 7.5 inches. And typically when you get wood from Dollar Tree, it is pretty rough on the ends. So I'm going to go over both ends with some sandpaper as well as get that glue residue off from the label. Once I wipe that off, I'm going to give this 2 thin coats of a white chalk paint, making sure that I paint this entire piece, front, back, and all the sides, and allow that to completely dry. Then I'm going to take a piece of painter's tape, put this at the very edge at the top on the right and the left. We're going to use that as a guide. Then we can take another piece of painter's tape to place below that so it'll be nice and straight. And I'm going to wrap this around to the back because I want to make sure that the sides are covered. Then take that top piece of tape down, pull it, put it right below the first piece of tape, and continue doing this until you have your final piece of tape at the very bottom. Again, this little guide is just going to keep your painter's tape going straight across. Then you could pull those little guide pieces off and you don't need those anymore. Make sure to go back and press all of your painter's tape down to make sure it's sealed so that when we paint this, it will not bleed through. Also, to help prevent the bleed through, I am going to take some of that same white paint and go over the top and bottom of each of the pieces of painter's tape on the sides as well as the front. Then you'll allow that time enough to completely dry. Again, this is going to help with any kind of bleed through because we're going to be using some really beautiful red paint. This is crimson red and it's made by Waverly. I'm going to paint all of the white painted portions on each of the edges as well as the very top piece, trying not to get it on the back because I want to keep the back solid white. Then I can go over the painted portions on the front. What I like to do is take my brush and go from the painter's tape over to the paint. It's just going to kind of help it not get under the painter's tape. I'll do that at the top and the bottom, and then I'll go over the middle and we'll let that completely dry. I have a wooden star. This came in a pack of 3 from Dollar Tree, and this is the medium size one. Now it's a little bit warped, so I'm going to take my fine grit sandpaper to go over it, and that wasn't doing the trick, so I got a coarser sandpaper to really kind of smooth that out. Once I wiped it off, I'm going to take some blue chalk paint, and this is called Ocean. It's made by Waverly. It's gorgeous. I'm going to paint the top as well as all of the outside edges. Once that has had time enough to dry, I'm going to use some of these stencils from Dollar Tree. I am going to cut each individual number out just so that I'll be able to place it where I want it. They just peel off and you kind of stick them on there, and then I'm going to overlap mine a little bit to keep the paint from bleeding. But then I realized that I wasn't going to have enough room, so I was going to have to move that up, and of course I am going to have to reuse that 7. So once I press those in place, I'm going to take some white paint and a sponge dauber, wipe most of it off, and then I'm just going to dab over top of the stencil for each of those numbers. Then I'm going to use my hair dryer to kind of dry that up pretty quick so that I'll be able to peel that 7 up and place it beside the other 7. And I did have a little bit of paint bleed. My little sponge dauber went outside of the stencil, but that's okay. I'm going to fix that. Once I get that number on there, I could just take my blue paint once the white paint is dry to touch that area up. Now it is time to remove our painter's tape from the wood block, and look how crisp those beautiful lines are. So I think that white paint really helped that red not bleed through. And I also did it on the sides, so look how perfectly straight they are, and the back side is completely white. Now we can glue our wooden star right to the center, and once I had that in place, I kind of felt like it needed something below it since I had to move the numbers up, so I just added a vinyl star decal, but you could use a sticker. I have two scrap pieces of fabric. These came from Dollar Tree scarves. I've already used over half of them on a previous project. I am removing the trim from the outside edges, and mine measures about 13 inches by 24 inches, so I cut that down to 10 inches by 24 inches, and then I'm going to cut that into 1 inch to 1.5 inch strips. They do not have to be perfect. After I get done with this red one, I'm going to do the exact same thing with the white one. So again, I'm cutting them down into 10-inch long, maybe 1 to 1.5 inch wide strips. Then take a mason jar lid, and you'll also need the sealed part for the lid. This is a regular mouth mason jar lid, not a wide mouth. You'll fold your fabric piece over in half, take the loop piece through, feed the tails through, and then pull it tight. It's almost like you're making a rag wreath. I'm going to alternate the colors between the white and the red. So again, just take your piece, fold it in half, feed the loop through the center, pull the tails through the loop, and pull it very tightly. Now you can put as many pieces of fabric on here to make it nice and full by kind of squeezing them together, or you can put less. I wanted mine really full, so I filled it all the way up. Then I'm going to take that seal and I'm going to cut this piece of fabric. Now this came from a Dollar Tree bandana. And I'm going to, you want it to be big enough to go around that little seal lid. But I'm going to take some polyfill first, roll that in a ball, and just sit it on top of the lid. Then take your fabric and wrap it around. Make sure you have enough to pull it all the way to the back side and get it really tight. And then take your ring part, flip it over, and then you can snap this right into place. You don't even have to glue it. And then because I did make mine a little longer than I should have, I am going to go back and trim up some of those fabric pieces to make it a little bit smaller. I think this would be really cute to set on tables for barbecues or for any of your celebrations, just some extra little table decor. I did trim some of the blue off of the back, and I decided to make another one with some red and white striped. I think this was also from that bandana. So I just cut these down to 8-inch lengths, about 1 to 1.5 inches wide. It is a little bit more difficult to get the tails through the loop when they're shorter, but then you don't have any waste at the end, so you don't have to trim it up. I did go ahead, fill this up full with all of that fabric, and I'm going to make the centerpiece the exact same way, just by putting some polyfill on the top of that lid, wrapping it with the fabric, get it really tight, then flip your ring over so that the lid just snaps right in place. For this project, I'm using a faux book stack that I found at Dollar Tree during Valentine's Day. I removed the bow and I thought it was attached to some ribbon, but that's really like a sticker, so I'm going to kind of go over that with some sandpaper and wipe it off. Then I'm going to use that blue ocean chalk paint to paint the bottom of the front of this book stack as well as the sides. I'm trying to be very careful not to get it in that groove. And this will take 2 coats just to cover up that faux ribbon and some of the wording. Once I get the sides done, I am going to flip it over and paint the entire bottom. Once that dries, I'm going to paint the middle of the book stack with a white chalk paint. Again, trying to be very careful not to get it in the grooves, but if you do, it's okay. I'll show you a trick to kind of clean it up later. Once that's dry, I'm going to take some crimson red chalk paint to paint the very top of this, the sides, and the top front of this book stack. And that will also take 2 coats to cover up that black and white faux label. Once that's dry, you can take some sandpaper, fold it in half, and if you have any paint in those little grooves, just sand it away. Make sure you wipe it off. And then I made a decal using my Cricut. I know not everybody has a Cricut, so you could use stickers for this, or you could even hand write it. That would be really pretty. I am going to place these on the right hand side edge of the book stack, and I found that it was just easier for me to put the transfer tape on it all together and then cut the individual words out. Once I have that in place, I'm going to take some twine and I'm going to figure out how long I need it to wrap around, but I don't want it to go on the bottom. So I just kind of folded mine over in thirds, and I'm going to glue the end of that right at the very bottom because I don't want to wrap it on the bottom, because when you do that, then it doesn't sit flat. So I'm going to straighten that up and make sure all three strands are side by side and straight, and glue it on the back side. Then I can cut away the excess twine on the back and go back to the front and cut it flush on the bottom so it'll sit flat. Then I wanted to make a very simple bow, so I took a piece of burlap ribbon, folded it over in half to create two little loops and two tails, double knotted it on the back, and then I'm going to dovetail each end of the tail of the bow just by folding it at half, cutting it at an angle, and glue this at the very top of the twine. For this project, I have 3 wooden leftover pickets from where we did our porch. The longest one is 11 inches, then one's 10 1/4 inch, and the smallest one's 9 inches. They've been in our shop, so they're pretty dirty, and I need to go over them with some sandpaper and really make sure that I get both of the ends completely flat so that they will be able to sit up straight. Once I have gone over all 3 of them and wiped them off, it is time to paint. The longest one I'm going to paint with that beautiful blue chalk paint. This is made by Waverly and it's called Ocean. I'm going to paint the entire piece. The smallest one I'm going to paint with some white chalk paint, and all of these only took 1 coat. For the middle piece, I'm going to paint that with that crimson red chalk paint, again making sure I get all sides including the ends. Once it's dry, I did make a decal with some stars using my Cricut, but you could always use stickers or stencils. I did not want mine all even. I kind of wanted them to go in different angles. I'm going to put that on one side of the blue one, and then I cut out individual stars so that I could place 3 on each side. So once I get this side done, I'm going to rotate it over to the opposite side and place 3 more. If you haven't guessed already, we are making firecrackers. So we're going to drill a hole at the very top. You don't want the hole too deep, just deep enough to be able to put some nautical rope in. I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces and then cut my nautical rope down. I started off with about 3 inches, but I ended up cutting it about 2 to 2.5 inches. And then we can use some hot glue to attach these in top of the hole that we just drilled. And I like that this nautical rope, you can take the end pieces and kind of spread them out a little bit so it kind of looks like it's frayed at the top. For this project, I'm using 2 wood planks. You can get this in a package from Dollar Tree, as well as 3 tumbling tower pieces, but I did cut one in half. I'm going to glue the whole piece at the top left, making it flush with the top and the left-hand side, and then glue that half piece right below that, making it flush at the side and the bottom, and repeat that on the opposite end. So it's going to look like this. Then I'm going to paint both of these pieces with that blue chalk paint, and I am going to paint the entire piece on the front with the blocks. I didn't paint all of the back side of that because you won't see it, but the plain one I did paint all sides. Then I made a decal. You can use stickers, stencils, whatever you like. And now that the paint is dry, on the piece that has the tumbling tower pieces, I'm going to place my decal with all of these stars. Then we're going to set that to the side for a moment because I'm using 4 leftover 5-gallon paint stir sticks that I've had in my craft room for a while. These are all 9¼ inch. I've already used the other ends on previous projects, and you know I don't throw anything away. I'm going to paint 2 of these with the white chalk paint on all sides, including the outside edges, and the other 2 I'm going to paint with that crimson red. Once you've allowed time enough for all of those to dry, we can now put our pieces together. So take the flat blue piece that does not have any of the tumbling tower pieces. You're going to need an extra piece just for support. Take your paint stick with the handle down, line that up with red, white, red, white. We're going to make it flush at the bottom and all of them touching each other at the top. To hold them in place, you could use a super glue or a permanent adhesive. For video purposes, I'm just using hot glue. I'm going to glue those down to the blue piece. Then we're going to take our other blue piece with the tumbling tower pieces to glue on top of that. So we're making Uncle Sam's hat. Once you have that in place, we don't need that extra piece that we were just using for support. And see, this will stand up on its own, and this is what it looks like on the sides. Now it's time for us to decorate it. So I'm going to take some greenery pieces and I'm just going to glue those down right at the top part of what you would call, I guess, the brim of the hat. And while that's setting up, I'm going to use some Dollar Tree ribbon to make a bow. And I'm also going to need some twine. So I'm just going to loop it over and make 1 loop at the top. And then I'm going to make a loop right below that the same size. And I'm just going to fold that over until I have 3 loops on each side. So just pull it over to the side, come down from the bottom, go over to the side till you have 3 loops on each side of your bow. Then you can set this down on your twine and tie a double knot on the back. I did not cut the excess twine off. I kind of like the way it looked. I'm going to separate all of my loops and glue that right in the center of the greenery. Then I can trim my twine down, and I decided to add a sweet little khaki colored button right in the center of the bow. I hope you enjoyed all of today's projects, and if you have a favorite, please let me know in the comment section down below because I always love to know which one is your favorite. If you haven't subscribed already, I would love for you to click that subscribe button right below the video. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please take care, and I'll see you guys next time.